This Boris FX webinar replay is brought to you by our technology partners, Dell, NVIDIA, and Intel.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today, where we are getting to grips with optics. So let's, there we go, lovely optics. So we've already talked about a little bit about optics. Optics are visual effects for photographers, and it's a plugin for Adobe Photoshop, Lightroom Classic, plus the standalone application. Now, today we're going to be focusing mainly on Photoshop, but you know, the actual optics interface is the same no matter where you start it from. So it doesn't matter if you're using Photoshop, Lightroom, or the standalone. All the stuff we're going to be seeing today is going to be the same. And yeah, optics is 160 filters with including 75 curated Boris Sapphire filters. And we're going to be taking a look, not through all of them, but we're going to be going through some of the ones that I think are the most fun to begin with. And fun is probably a word that we're going to be coming back to a lot with optics, because one of the things that optics kind of sort of makes everyone want to play a lot, because not only do you have this huge number of different filters, you've also got thousands and thousands of different presets to kind of get your creative juices going. And we'll be looking through these as well as we go through. So here's our sort of basic breakdown for what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be looking at optics and seeing, you know, basically taking you through a workflow situation with it, how we start to add in filters and mask them. We can build up different layers of filters as well, and that's where optics really starts getting a bit, you know, really interesting to my mind. It's how fast and easy it is to build up these complex looking looks just in a very short amount of time. So we're going to be looking at cinematic looks. We're going to be looking at lighting elements, and we're also going to be looking at how we start to build up kind of templates as well. So this is something that's going to be very useful if you're doing kind of volume photography work, things like pack shots or you know, maybe wedding photos or something like that, where you've got, you know, something in you want a fairly consistent look throughout a number of different images. So yeah, let's get started. Let's get rid of all of this. There we go. And let's pop into Photoshop. And this is going to be our first image that we're going to be working on. Let's cancel that. And one of the things that is really useful about optics is that it works as a smart filter. So if I right click on my layer and convert this to a smart object, when we apply optics now, which we can do just from the regular filter menu, it just pops down there, Boris FX Optics. When we apply it here, we're going to be taken directly into the optics interface. Let's just reset my effect. That was the last effect that I had open. So yeah, so we just come straight into the optics interface. But remember that smart filter thing, because in about 5 minutes or so, that's going to be a bit important. Okay, so here's the optics interface. And if you've never seen optics before, which I'm going to guess that most of you haven't, let's do a very brief run through of what we're looking at. On the left-hand side, we have our effect layers, so our effects over here. Down at the bottom, we have our filters, and these are broken down into, I think it's 16 different categories. I should know this number, but we can just be clicking through these and you get to see what these filters are doing. So we have a lot of different filters there. In the middle, we have the viewer. Obviously, this takes up most of the real estate because this is where we're going to be, you know, looking at most of our work. I'm going to go through some of these buttons at a later date as and when we need them. But over on the right-hand side is where our presets are going to pop in, and also where we're going to have our parameters to start changing up how this effect looks. So let's start off with our first effect. And I think I'm going to come in, and with this shot, I'm just going to try and make it look a little bit more compelling. I mean, it's a a nice looking shot, but the sky is really dull. The colors are pretty dull, really. And I'm just going to sort of spice this up a little bit. So if I come into the grads and tints, we can see we've got a lot of different effects for doing gradients or for doing tints, including things like split tone, sunset, photographic here. And as soon as I click on any of these effects, you can see it being applied to the image straight away. And you'll also see that over on the right hand side, we have a number of presets popping in as well. So this is one of the things that's actually really compelling about optics, is that you can start to kind of experiment and see what's going to happen with particular effects and filters, and sort of explore what they're going to do before even moving as far as clicking on them. I'm going to start off with just a quick color gradient and find one of the blues that's going to kind of go with what I'm after. We'll stick with just the tropic blue there. Now, in the viewer itself, some of the effects have widgets or controls which we can do directly in the viewer. So in this case, it's a gradient. So I can pick up my gradient points and adjust where the gradient is going to sit. So we can sit it down around about there. And that's looking pretty good. Up at the top of the viewer, I have lots of different compare modes. We'll go through just with a simple wipe here. So I can just wipe before and after, left and right, or up and down as well if we want to do it that way. So I'll turn that off. Now, the eagle-eyed of you will probably see that, actually let's bring that down a little bit more so you don't have to be that eagle-eyed. You can start to see that our gradient is actually going over the top of the model's hat. This might be a look that you like. I actually want to try and get rid of that a little bit more so it's not quite as pronounced. Now, every single one of these effects that we put on can have multiple masks applied to them. And we're going to go through a few of these as the webinar goes on. But I'm just going to start off with a simple spot mask. And this, as you can see, it's just a spot to decide where things are going to go. And I can come in here, adjust things up, adjust the hard edge with the small circle and the soft edge with the bigger circle, bring that into place. And I have other controls up at the top now. These are contextual controls, so I can do things like invert or change up things like the aspect ratio and sort of pop that into place, maybe around about there, to bring that in a little bit. So if we take a little look now, we can see we've taken away most of that. There we go. Let's actually do this before and after. This plays a little bit easier on the webinar. We've taken off most of that gradient on the hat there. Cool. Now I said at the start that we can layer these things up, and this is where things start getting a lot more fun, is that we can very easily build up stacks of effects. So I'm just going to add another effect down here, and I think I'm going to use a sepia. Let's bring a sepia down there. I'm going to do quite a rich sepia. We do have, again, lots of these presets, and with sepia, this mainly controls how deep and powerful that effect is. And I'm going to add another mask onto this because I just want to be affecting the skin tones mostly. So let's come up here, add a mask, and I'm going to go to selection. And this is going to create a mask. Well, at the moment, it's going to be based off of luminance. With all of these complex masks, it's actually a bit easier to see them if we click on our mask view, which is just the M on the keyboard, M for mask. Nice and easy. And I can even come in here, something like hue, and build up a mask based on the hue instead. So if we come in, actually keep that around about there, and just adjust the mask up. So it's mainly going to be affecting the skin tones, maybe a little bit of the, let's take that down. So we're not affecting too much of, or not bringing in too many of the flowers. and I can blur this out as well. And we've got different ways of blurring things, inwards, outwards, or centered. Cool, when we're happy with that, let's just turn the mask back off and we can see the effect. Take a look at the before and after. It's getting there. It's not quite where I want it right now. I think it's probably a little bit too blurred on the mask as well, but it's also too heavy in effect. So just because we're using presets to start our look doesn't mean that we don't have full control over them. So if we come into parameters now, I still have absolute control over how this effect is looking. So I can do things like preserving the highlights. So bring this up a little bit and you can start to see we're not saturating the highlights as much. We see a lot of these controls across many of the filters. So there's a lot of filters that sort of share similar controls. So once you know how to master one, you know how to master a great deal of them. And so if we take a little look now, that's looking a lot nicer, and it's making the skin look a lot nicer as well. It's starting from where we were. Cool. If you do have questions about what we're seeing, then ask them. I'm going to be moving through quite a lot of images today, so we are going to have some natural breaks to pick up questions. So if there are any questions right now, now is a good time to ask them.
Hey Ben, it's Ross. I'll jump in. One question is someone was asking, right now, like in what you're showing, we can see that not all the thumbnails are updating live, like down the bottom. And I just wanted to maybe you could mention that preference.
Absolutely, yeah, that's really good. Down here we've got a mixture of different types of filters. So anything that says S and then the filter name is actually a Sapphire filter. And so what I can do there is in the preferences, turn on live thumbnails, hit OK on that. And then if I move to another area here, it's going to show me thumbnails across all of them where they make sense. So there are going to be a few that don't kind of make sense, but with those live thumbnails turned on, all of them get turned on. The main reason why that is a preference is that some people don't need to see the live thumbnails, and it can take a little while just to process those out. So that's why it's there as a preference.
Great, thanks for answering that, Ben.
No worries.
That's really about the only question. So I think you can keep going.
Cool, great. Well, let's take this back into Photoshop. So I'm just going to hit the process cog in the top left-hand corner, bring this back into Photoshop, and it will process it out. And like I said at the beginning, it's brought it in as a smart filter. Now, what this means is that I can save this image as a Photoshop file. Might be a good idea to actually save it as a Photoshop file. Let's let the hard drive wake up. It's one of the problems about me talking a little bit too much is that the hard drives go to sleep, wake up. And when it gives me the save dialog, which is going to be in 3, 2, 1.5. Yeah, when we actually save this out, there we go. Let's take this into the stills after. Save that one there. I can close this down now. Open it back up at a later time, obviously a lot later, and it's still popped in there as a smart filter. So what this means is that if someone sees this and we want to change this up a little bit, or we want to add something else to it, I can just double click on that. Let's come out there. Let's double click on it. There we go. And it will have a little think. And for some reason, it hasn't picked up I might just have to wait for it to calculate out the mask on this one in a second. There we go. Yeah, so we can bring this back and have it exactly as we had it before. And it means that I can change things up. Let's just add a duotone on, something that we can we can really see. I can change the blend mode on this as well, actually. So we end up with something, oh, okay, that's maybe not the nicest blend mode. Let's just take that to normal so we can actually see it. And I can save that out again. And it means that this process is completely non-destructive. So that's something that is really, really useful to know. Not only is it non-destructive within the image, so within the Photoshop file, because it's saved as a smart filter. If we are opening things up in the standalone, you can save out TIFF files with the setups. So with these effects, the layer effects, all saved within that file as well. So it's a non-destructive process, whatever way you look at it. If you do like this look, let's say we take this down to maybe 30% and just put this onto a different blend mode, maybe something like overlay. If you do like this look, we can actually save this setup out for later. So I've hit save setup. Let's come into my training here, Great Images Optics. I can save this out as just a standard separate file that I can then give up. Let's take this out, Ben 1, there we go. Yeah, save this out as a file that I can then send out to people or use on other images at a later date. Save image before quitting. No, thank you. Let's take us back there. So I think that's something that's quite important to know, is that, you know, anything we do with inside Optics, we can always come back. It's not like a lot of other filters that are just there to give your image a look. Once that's been put on a layer, that's it. It's baked in forever, and you can't sort of go back and change it. But with Optics, you can go back and change it, which is really nice. I'm going to take another little look at a different type of file now. Let's just take this out here, and I'm just going to do the same things I did previously. This say, oh, okay, I'm just going to crash Photoshop is what I'm going to do. Okay, let's spark Photoshop up again. Yeah, I'm going to show you what we can do with raw files and how we can work with the dynamic range of raw, and also what Optics lets us do. Let's bring that back in with its effects processing. Okay, so we're back in again. There we go. So I'm going to convert this to a smart object as before, and I'm just going to show you something in the properties here. So in Photoshop, we've got this set to 8-bit per color, 8 bits per channel color. So we can take this into 32-bit depth, and let's not rasterize any of that stuff, and everything starts to look a little bit dark. Let's bring this into Optics. So with Optics, we've got, let's again reset that one and come over to a histogram. Yeah, with Optics, we've got a lot of different color correction filters. I mean, this is like some of the bread and butter of Optics is the color correction, and being able to, you know, do sort of creative and more than the standard like color correction just with a simple filter. But for this one, I'm just going to use the develop filter and just bring up the exposure, and you can see we still have all of that dynamic range that is contained within that raw file. And something else we've got, if I blow out some of the highlights here, I'm going to bring another effect over the top. I'm just going to bring a color correct effect over the top, just to show you some of the presets as well. That's quite nice. But we'll go straight to the parameters. Yeah, all of the effects and filters that we're working on in Optics are in floating point color, and that sort of sounds sort of weird and technical, but what that means in practice is that we can come back and we can sort of blow things out within one filter, sort of, you know, make highlights a little bit over bright in one filter, and then bring those back at a later date. So we're sort of going back to where we were before we did the develop. So that's just something really interesting and really, you know, really noteworthy as well, is that all of the effects that we're dealing with are being processed out in floating point. Bing, lovely. Cool. Let's move on to the next one. If there are any other questions while I open up the next file, this is a great time to do them.
No, Ben, I think that everything's going well. In fact, someone had just asked about working in 32-bit when you showed it. So
Well,
I
there we
think,
go.
Yes. Yeah.
my
Just keep going.
psychic abilities are carrying on apace. That's quite good.
There you go.
There we go. So yeah, one other way of doing this, I don't have to right click on my layer to turn it into a smart object. Photoshop does have another way of doing that right at the top. It just says convert for smart filters. It does the same thing. It does convert it to a smart object, but it means you know, you're not going back and forth all the time. So that's a nice little Photoshop thing for you. And let's come into optics and let's get rid of this one. I should actually mention why optics is doing this. Optics is actually giving us the last setup that we had for the file. Oh, sorry, for the last setup it had before it closed. And the reason it's doing that is to sort of protect you if you have forgotten to turn something into a smart object. And then you sort of do all your work and you go, oh no, I actually wanted to have this as a smart filter. What this means is that you can go back, you know, undo, convert your layer into a smart filter, pop back into optics, and it will pop your image stack, sorry, your effects stack back in as it was previously. So it's a nice little useful filter. What we're going to be doing with this one is actually coming in and sort of just trying to affect the background and the foreground differently. I'm going to show you how to use another one of our mask tools. I'm going to actually start with high contrast, I think. There we go. So if I put high contrast on this and just find a preset that looks good in the background, it makes our foreground look a little bit suboptimal, I think, less than special. So I'm going to use another little mask tool here, which is something called Easy Mask. And Easy Mask is a great way of getting selections within optics with doing very little work. So basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be just drawing an area that is going to define my foreground, which is going to be here. So just by left clicking and dragging, I'm going to right click and drag, and I can draw an area that describes my background. I don't have to be amazingly detailed about this here. I could also come in and fill these in, but I just want to show you what's going to happen when I get it to generate a mask here. So I can click on generate mask. It's going to take a second. Let's look at the mask it's created. So that's actually pretty nice. We've got we're keeping in a lot of the hair detail there. I can see I've got a couple of little bits and bobs there that I might want to get rid of. So it's just another couple of strokes just to sort of fix that up. I'll regenerate my mask there, and that should get rid of that all completely. So that's looking pretty nice. And I can do things like I would do with any other mask, you know, invert it. I can blur it out as well a little bit, add a bit of softness to it. And let's have a look at what that does to our image. So if I go to high contrast again and go through here, you can see I've now got my effect only affecting the background and not affecting the foreground. So if I come back here, and what should we do on this one? Well, let's come into our grads and tints again, and maybe we'll add on something like sepia we've looked at, skin tone. Let's have a look at skin tone. I can copy and paste. I don't even have to copy and paste. I can duplicate masks between layers just by clicking and dragging. And that mask still remains completely editable. So I can still sort of invert that there, come back, and now I'm affecting the foreground separately to the background. So just with creating one mask, which took us, a few seconds to do, we have, such a huge amount of control still within that mask. And I can come in, maybe preserve highlights a little bit. And if I wanted to, build on top of that a little bit more, this is where things are going to start getting dangerous, because I'm going to start to want to play. I'm not allowed to play. This is a webinar that people are watching. And that's a very, very big temptation with optics, is that you sort of start to go down a road and you go, okay, yeah, this is looking pretty good. But actually, if I add on one more filter, I can get it looking, even better. And this one here, I think, and let's go back up to this one, and I can change my mind at any point. So even though this high contrast is right at the bottom of the stack, if I decide that I think we could be doing something a little bit better, a little bit different with this filter, or even with any other filter, I can change it. So if I come into my film lab now, come into my film effect, and let's look for day for night. That should be quite nice. Bring that in there. I can make those changes. Let's turn the grain down. I can make those changes at any point. Again, this is that non-destructive workflow, which I think is very, very nice. And I can maybe dip that down just a little bit more. So all of these presets we can just use as, the starting off point for, or the inspiration for the effect that we actually want to do. So let's add one more effect up here. I'm gonna look at one of the lights, because this is where stuff really starts getting Instagram worthy. We have a lot of the Sapphire lights. So these are filters that have been used in countless Hollywood films and the biggest TV series. Things like lens flare, which we're going to be definitely looking at later. Glow, which again we're going to be looking at in the next shot. But also stuff like light leaks. So if I have light leaks turned on, let's find something here. We can add in, actually that's looking kind of nice. Maybe something even bigger. No, that's looking good. So we can take something like light leaks and just apply that to our image, and we still have those widgets over the top. So we can sort of come in and we can drag things over and find the perfect placement for them interactively within the viewer. If I come into the parameters, I can also enable multiple effects on multiple elements. Let's make this one a little bit less harsh. There we go. Let's bring that down. Bring that over the top there. And we can come in and we can change all this sort of stuff around it. So this sort of thing where we've got this huge amount of flexibility and this such a large number of effects to play with. This is where stuff starts getting really fun and really interesting to play with. Let's just get that look in there, maybe take the brightness down a bit. And bring that down the bottom. Maybe just over her body, there we go. So we take a look at the before and after on this one. Bloom to bloom. And I can tell we can still sort of do a lot more with this. We can add in things like highlights and you know, lots of different sort of relighting kind of filters, but this is where I start getting carried away and where I have to actually stop myself and just go, Ben, we need to move on to the next shot. So let's just process that out, or hit apply, I should say, and that will bring us back into Photoshop, and we can have a little look at that. So before, after, before, and after. Cool, I hope that's making sense so far. Any questions?
Hey Ben, no, I think it's people are definitely lots of great comments. People are really interested in what you're showing. There's actually one thing that someone asked, which I'm not sure if Marco is able to answer, which I don't personally know, which is when you're showing just a linear gradient mask and you want to move the mask around, you know, you have the corners to actually move the gradient, but can you gang the two together so you're just sliding like the top or bottom? That makes sense.
No, you're going to have to move them separately, but we could add like a, you know, like a corner or a, you know, like bar on-screen controls at the bottom or the edges to kind of move both at the same time. That's something that we could add.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that.
Cool. Well, let's look at our next shot then. I think everyone knows the process for this so far: convert to smart object or convert for smart filters and come into optics. Cool. With this one, I think what I want to do with this is try and build up a bit more of an interesting sort of look with this. We've got quite a nice kind of starting image. It's lacking a little bit of contrast, so I want to make this pop a little bit more. So I'm going to come into my color here, and I could choose one of the we've got auto adjust actually, so we can sort of do auto contrast or auto levels, which will get us into a, you know, some sort of good place. Or we have things like curves or develop, or even just, you know, levels. So I can sort of bring this in here and just, you know, make sure we've got the histogram both in the levels and down at the bottom down here, so we can make sure that I'm not, you know, blowing out my whites too much, except for artistic reasons. There we go. So let's bring that around about there. And if we have a look at the before and after, you know, we've just given this a little bit more contrast. But is it enough? I'm going to take a snapshot of this. Now, snapshot means that I can take an image, or sorry, a snapshot of any picture that we're working on in optics, and then I can compare that with, you know, different sorts of layers or different effects at a later date, which is exactly what we're going to be doing here. Because I want to build up a little bit more contrast, I think we can make this pop a little bit more. So I'm going to turn off this effect just by using the little lightning icon, and I'm going to add a different effect. And this is actually, when I'm working on fashion stuff, this is actually one of my favorite little effects to sort of start to build up some really interesting local contrast. And it's an effect called Ozone, and it seems to be like a little bit of a strange beast when you turn it on, but it's a very simple concept. What Ozone does is it breaks up the image into different zones, so different luminance zones, going from, you know, the darkest shadows up to the brightest whites, and it lets us do a color correction on those different zones. I should say by default it's working off the luminance. We can set it up just as we did do with the selection mask. We can set it up to do any kind of channel keying, so based off hue, saturation, the average of the colors, RGB, or cyan, magenta, and yellow. I'm going to stick with luminance because that makes a lot more sense in this particular example. And I'm just going to come up, starting with my my dark levels, and just bring up the contrast and maybe even the saturation a little bit in the darkest of the darkest areas of the image, and kind of build this up a little bit here. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to get really sort of fine granular corrections going on across our image. It takes, you know, a little bit longer to be fair than coming in and just tweaking up the curves, but the effect that we get out of it is a lot better or a lot more interesting with a lot of different types of images. Especially as you can start to see already that we're beginning to build up the kind of the 3D of the clothes a bit more. We're bringing in a bit more depth into the image. I want to be a bit careful when I start moving into the brighter areas, or past the mid-tones here and into the brighter areas, that I don't use gamma too much. Sorry, I don't use contrast too much, because there are some areas, especially when this was quite low contrast to begin with, that there's, you know, certain ranges don't have a huge amount of information in them. So I'm just going to start working with the gamma here just to build up those particular areas. Now we're getting like really into the brightest kind of areas there, and this is just like, there we go. These are just the real highlights. So we're not really doing a lot to those. But let's just compare that with the before and after. So with the original and the other one, that's looking quite nice. But let's compare it now to the snapshot that we did, that was just the levels command. I can do the same thing. So that's just levels, bringing it in, giving it a bit of contrast. And this is with Ozone, where we've built up, you know, a lot more of that local contrast, and we've got a much richer image already. And you can start to see that we've built in a lot more depth into those clothes. And if we're doing fashion work, you know, that's really where we're trying to do. We're trying to sort of, yeah, sculpt some nice 3D light around our subject to try and make everything just, yeah, look really nice and really sharp. When I say sharp, I don't mean just like sharpness sharp. I actually mean cool and good looking. Okay, so let's come in. Let's start off with now giving this a bit more of a look. And when we're doing sort of looks, I like to come into the Film Lab category. This is where I can really start to build up some sort of, you know, really interesting types of effects here. So we've got things like bleach bypass, and again, like tons of different presets. Some of them, oh my word, there we go. Some of them are a bit more suitable for other types of footage than others. So, you know, I don't think that this image is going to respond very well. I mean, this is a nice sort of like beautiful fashion image. This isn't kind of gritty, you know, gritty sort of action film style image where we actually want the bleach bypass. So let's skip over that. And we've got things like cross process, and these can be really fun. Now, little hint or little tip for everyone here. When I'm looking through a lot of these presets, as you can see, these are mixed like really, really strongly. Like, you're in no doubt that you've put an effect on here when you touch any of these presets. So what I like to do when I'm sort of auditioning certain looks is I like to come into my effect and use the blend over here just to take the opacity down to 50%. So it means we're already mixing back that effect with the original, and that gives us you know, a lot of the time a lot softer of a look, but it means that we can get a better idea of how we would, you know, probably use this in real life. So actually there's quite a few here that I really like. I kind of like that. I'm going to add a favorite to that. I like that one as well. I'm going to add a favorite to that. And at any point with our presets, we can just look at the favorites, or if we've made any custom presets, we can look at those ones here as well. I'm not going to stop with cross-processing. I'm going to move on because I think we've got a lot of other stuff to look here. We took a look at the film effect when we did the day for night stuff. Film effect is really, really great, but we haven't looked at film stocks. And film stocks, this is another one which I tend to do that little trick of just taking that down to 50% opacity here. But film stocks gives us hundreds of different presets. In fact, we have so many presets in film stocks that there are categories for the presets. So if we're just looking for black and white films, we can get black and white. Let's actually turn this to 100%, so you can see this is really black and white. There we go. We can just use the arrow keys to move through, see if any of these pop. That's kind of fun. There we go. Or we can come to, color film, which gives us a huge number of different color films. So we get the process there. Or motion picture films, which again, slightly different, or actually very different. Or historical films, like developing things with albumin, ambrotype, anthratype. And again, these are ones that really do, all of these color ones respond so well just to knocking that down to 50%. Because we get like something that is meant to be just a tint over the top, but when it's mixed back, we can get some very surprising effects. Again, that one I really like that. Let's come back to our cross-processing. No, let's go to color films here. We'll find, I will actually settle on one in a second. I want something that gives me that nice big saturated pop. There we go. Kodak 200 gold. I knew it. Let's favorite that. Okay. And if you want to, or if you need to, like some of the time, the look itself of these is going to be fantastic, but it might just crush the blacks a little bit too much in your image. So you might be sort of coming in and getting, your blacks are a little bit too, your shadows are a little bit too dark, or your highlights are a little bit too light. We do have the ability to bring all of that stuff up in here with the color correction filters. So we can always come back and just lift the shadows up just a little bit there. Or maybe even, I might even lift my highlights back up again there. So that's kind of nice. So just take a quick look before and after. I can just turn off the processing on that. It's looking all right. Let's bring that up a little bit more, or maybe. See, I told you this is the danger of bringing me into optics, is that it's far too tempting just to keep playing around and until you find the perfect thing. There we go. That's something a little bit different. So I'm going to add one more filter to this. No, I'm not. I'm going to add two more filters. The first filter that I am going to add is going to be glow. So I happen to know that glow is in the light category. If you don't know that glow is in the light category, but you want a glow, you can always come into the search on the filters and just type in glow. I can even only spell the first three letters, and it still brings me up glow, glow darks, glow edges, and glow rings. And I happen to know I want to use just the regular glow. So if I come in here, now we've got, again, the on-screen controls for being able to bring up our glow quite high. If we take a look at the parameters over on the right-hand side as well, as I'm dragging these up and down, you can see that the parameters are changing along with it. So obviously those are all tied together. If I don't want to see the widgets, at the moment they're sort of slap bang in the middle of our face, I can just turn off the widgets just at the bottom there. I'm going to bring up my threshold, so where the glow starts from, take my brightness up quite high, take my width up quite high, and I've just got a really nice soft glow going across that image. And that's one of the things that Sapphire's glow is known for, is that it is superbly high quality, really nice, soft, natural looking glow. It's great. And the final effect I'm going to add onto this one, we're going to go back into the film lab. I'm just going to add a little bit of grain. Now, grain is, I'm not going to spend too much time on this for two reasons. One, grain is notoriously difficult to see on webinars because there is such a huge amount of compression that goes on between me sitting here and doing something and you actually seeing it. So what I'm going to do instead, let's actually turn our viewer to full resolution. So this is something that's worth noting. When we're watching stuff back in the viewer, we can be seamlessly working with proxy files, so lower image quality files. So yeah, lower resolution files. That's the way to say it. That's the right way to say it. From 1K, 2K, 4K, if the image is big enough, 8K, and also full size. By working at a sort of lower resolution here in the viewer, it means that we process out all of these effects a lot faster when we're in that sort of creative mood where we need to do things fast. When we're looking at stuff like grain, we should be checking this out at full resolution, just so that we can see what the grain is actually going to be doing to our image. Because the moment that we hit process here, or the moment that we save a file out from the standalone version, Optics always processes that at full res. So it doesn't matter what you have that selected to, Optics is always going to take out the full resolution for that file. So all the effects are going to be processed at full res as well. So I'm just going to save this out. Take a look at that, and we'll have a look at the before and the after, before and after. And I don't think I used a single mask on this image, and we still managed to build up a ton of really nice sort of local contrast with that. Cool. Before I go to my last image, I've just seen what the time is. Before we go to the last image, are there any questions?
Hey, Ben, awesome job. Everyone's really excited about what you've been showing, and you make it look so easy and fun. It is really cool to see. Someone was asking about just some of the effects have on-screen displays and how to hide those, like, some of the Sapphire effects. That would be a nice thing to show.
Yeah. I mean, that's all of the, let's pop back into here. Yeah, all of the Sapphire ones. We go back into things like the S-Glow. Yeah, all of them have like the widgets you can turn on and off directly in here. And depending on what type of effect it is, they may have, one or more different widgets that you can turn on and off.
Right. And you don't have to use those on-screen displays. You're
absolutely
totally,
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. You can do everything with the parameters. It's just that some of the effects, things like lens flare, for example, that's just a lot easier to start doing the main bulk of your work just with
interactively positioning.
Yeah,
cool. But yeah, no, I think that, there was another question, Ben, which was your laptop specs. We know it's a Dell laptop, but I don't know the actual model. I think some people might be interested in that.
I don't either.
It is a Dell laptop, right?
It's a Dell laptop. If you look back at like the very start of the webinar with Jesse's pictures, it's the one on the right hand side of
7740 or so. Let me see
I
if I
believe
can
that's
find
the
it.
one. Yeah.
Let me see if I can find the info.
I was going to mention there was a lot of questions regarding the masking. The masking does not translate over to Photoshop. It could, but there were certain design decisions made with this where the masking occurs at the working resolution. In this case, Ben is set to 2K. And what it does, it up-reses to the full resolution when rendered. This is not an issue for when masking filters because you don't need, pixel accuracy as you do when you're compositing. Could that be changed? Yes. At one point, Digital Film Tool sold an Easy Mask plugin for that use, and we tried not to have products overlap themselves. There is a possibility with some minor reworking where we could transfer those masks over to Photoshop. We'd have to check performance, and rendering would be slightly longer because the mask step would render at full resolution. So it's something that we certainly could look at. It seems like there's a lot of interest in that, so that's good to hear.
Cool. Yeah, I mean the Easy Mask is a fantastic way. In fact, all of the ways that the mask work does making complex masks rather simple. Also, I mean, something that we haven't seen because we just haven't had time in this webinar is to show how you can start to combine masks together to get more sort of complex looks or complex isolated areas with the masks. But that's definitely something that you can do as well. Yeah. So Russ, go for it.
Yeah, just a quick question with Marco maybe on the line too, but I don't believe this is, someone's asking right now in a question about the Sapphire effects, and if you're running optics in demo mode, can you preview the optics, the Sapphire effects? And yeah, you can run in demo mode. You can get a 15. Yeah.
Yeah, the trial. Yeah.
Yeah.
The trial. You'll need the trial to. It will be fully functional, unrestricted for 15 days. But without that trial license, in straight demo mode where it's watermarked, those Sapphire filters can't be used. So if you want to demo it, get the trial. Everything will work just as Ben is doing it with no watermarks, and you'll be able to use it.
Cool. Thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, you just go to the help menu, bring up the I think you can bring up the licensing dialog, and that's
right when you apply. Yeah, right when you apply optics or start the standalone, you'll get this. You'll get an activation menu that kind of looks similar to this.
Yeah, cool. It will say like activate, request trial, and yeah, that sort of thing. So that's cool. I'm not gonna use this effect. We are gonna take. I've got there's 4 minutes left. So I'm running short on time again. So what I'm going to do instead of building up an effect is I'm going to come in and show you something that I made earlier, because that's the right way of doing it. I'm not going to say cheating, because it's not cheating. We did all the effects, but you can start to build up some really interesting sorts of looks. Let's come down and just have a look. Oh, this is Ozone again. So let's come down here. This is the one that I was using to build up that local contrast. I use Ozone quite a lot, but we have things like render effects. So we can get stuff like Aurora within the render effects. We've got Zap as well for making up lightning. And what we can do with Aurora, if I just make sure that I'm working on that there, is that originally this was created for doing sort of like the Aurora Borealis, lovely sort of night sky type things. But there are so many uses you can do with Aurora for making up kind of cool lighting strands and you know, just sort of putting things over the top of other things and changing the blend mode on it, that we can even use it as something like a kind of more customizable light leak. And this is something with the splines as well. This is where we can, you know, we've really got full interactivity going on directly within the viewer. So this is something where having, you know, being able to have the splines and the light position straight in there is such a huge boon to sort of workflow and creativity and speed. If I open up another file, let's open up my flares. Yeah, I would be completely remiss to show you optics without actually looking at lens flare even just a little bit, because lens flare is such a huge part of Sapphire. And we come into light here and into lens flare there. Yes, lens flare is such a huge part of Sapphire, and it's one of these effects that's been used. You've seen it in tons and tons of the, you know, the biggest films around, and you know, some of the biggest, most high-profile TV shows as well. And you've got it now in Photoshop for the first time. And if I just start off, I'll just show you the original on this one. So do the compare, do the wipe. So this is the original on this here. And what I've done is I've just come in and brought in one of the, or a couple of the lens flares here, just to come and sort of add a little bit more kind of creative look to our image. And we can, I can't remember how many presets we've got now. It's a lot of presets, and these ones either, you know, mimic real life camera lenses, so things like some of the Zeiss lenses or the Angenieux lenses here. So these are lenses that go for tens of thousands of dollars, and you've got, you know, simulations of those flares directly within optics, within Photoshop. But you've also got some of these more kind of creative and, you know, high concept flares as well. So things like it came from the, where is it? It fell from the sky. You know, just absolute madness, which is just fantastic. These are some of my favorite things to play with. We can take that flare and just sort of give it a whole new life just by bringing it in, changing it up a little bit here. We have all the parameters available to us. If you've got an effect or a flare that you really like, but let's cancel out this, and I'll take this into full res again, so we can see this properly. Yeah, if you've got a flare that you really like, but there's some like extraneous little elements that you don't fancy, you've got full control over that. You can just click on Edit Lens. It pops you into the flare designer, and I can have a look at things like the chroma ring or the multi-spots. Maybe I don't want the multi-spots. I can just turn those off. The shimmer I really like, chroma ring I really like, the random spots I don't like, I can just turn them off. I can hit OK, and that takes a couple of seconds, and it will just update that for me. So we have lens, like the lens flare here is just absolutely out of this world, and really, again, really fun to play with. I know I keep coming back to that, you know, that word fun, but optics does genuinely put a smile on my face when I'm using it, because I can start off with an image, and then by the time I'm finished with it, I've taken it in a completely different direction than I originally intended to, simply because, you know, when we're looking at some of the effects, we can go, oh, actually, you know, that might work quite nicely on top of here. Let's have a little experiment with that. And then, you know, you click on a filter, and all of a sudden you've got all these other presets that pop up, and you go, oh, actually I hadn't thought of doing it like that. And so you click on another preset, and it sort of takes you in a completely different direction again. And you go, oh, well, I've got all these blend modes to play around with. I wonder what happens if I put it into soft light. And then again, it takes you in a completely different direction. So, you know, it can turn into a bit of a rabbit hole, but at the end of it, you know, you've got an image that you wouldn't have gotten any other way, because it takes you down that process, a different sort of creative process.